Good morning. Hope you guys had a great weekend. Today we're going to look at some of the trig functions and their values based on what quadrant they fall in. But before we do that, would you do these review problems, please? Okay, so take a few minutes and try these. Now that you've got those done, let's see what we have our answers are. First of all, with this cosecant, remember that cosecant of pi over 3, remember that cosecant is 1 over the sine. Sine of pi over 3 is the square root of 3 over 2, so 1 over that would be 2 over the square root of 3. And then we need to multiply that by 3. Cotangent of pi over 4 is the reciprocal of tangent of pi over 4. Tangent of pi over 4 is 1. The reciprocal of 1 is still 1. So we could write this as 6 over the square root of 3 plus 1. But if we wanted to have a common denominator, we could multiply this by the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. And that would give us 6 plus the square root of 3 all over the square root of 3. Then if we wanted to rationalize, distribute that through, we get 6 square roots of 3 plus 3 all over 3. Now, when you put these in your calculator, make sure that if you are talking about degrees, that your calculator's in degrees, and if you are talking about radians, that your calculator's in radians. Doing these, we see that the sine of 32 degrees is 0.5299. The cosecant of 126 degrees is the same as 1 over the sine of 126 degrees, and that is 1.2361. The secant of 463 degrees is 1 over the cosine of 463 degrees, which is negative 4.4454. These are in radians, so we need to put those in radians. Cosine of pi over 7, we simply plug into our calculator. We get 0.9010 if we round to 4 decimal places. Tangent of 2 pi over 5, we can also put that in our calculator. We get 3.0777. Oops, let me try to clean that one up just a little bit. Let's try that again. 3.0777. Cotangent is 1 over the tangent. So we get the tangent of negative 8 pi over 5. 1 over the tangent of negative 8 pi over 5. When we take the tangent of that, we get 0.3249. Okay, so let's look at the next page. Okay, so let's talk about these. What is the tangent of pi over 2? What is the cotangent of pi over 2? What is the secant of 3 pi over 2? Talk to your side partner about what those are. Okay, where are the trig functions undefined? What is the tangent of pi over 2? Remember that tangent is sine over cosine, but remember that tangent but the cosine of theta is 0 if our theta is pi over 2. So the tangent of this is undefined. Cotangent of pi over 2. Cotangent, remember, is cosine over sine, or 1 over the tangent, which in this case is 0 over 1, which is 0. Secant of 3 pi over 2 is 1 over the cosine. 3 pi over 2, cosine is 0, so we have 1 over 0. It's also undefined. So take a minute. We haven't talked about cosecant yet. But where is cosecant of theta undefined? Where are those functions undefined? Talk with your side partner about that, please. All right, tangent is undefined when sine, when the denominator, so when cosine, is 0. Cotangent is undefined when the denominator, so sine, is 0. Secant is also undefined when cosine, because it's one of the cosine, is 0. And cosecant is undefined when sine is 0. So where is cosine 0? Cosine is 0 at pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. Secant is 0, or undefined, also at those things, pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. When is cotangent and cosecant undefined? When sine is equal to 0 for either one of those. That occurs at 0, pi, and 2 pi. So this one is at 0, pi, and 2 pi. It's important to know when the trig functions are undefined so that we know what they are at all places. All right, so now let's look at the trig function, the signs of each trig function in each quadrant. Take a minute and mark your quadrants here as to which is positive and which is negative. Go ahead and pause it. All right. Okay, so in the first quadrant, our x is positive and our y is positive. So it's a plus, plus. In our second quadrant, our x is negative and our y is positive. So it's a minus, plus. In our third quadrant, they are both negative. And in our fourth quadrant, the x is positive and the y is negative. Now, think about these things. Remember that sine, if we're talking in terms of the circle, is y over r. Cosine is x over r. Tangent is y over x. Cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, so it is r over y. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine, so it is r over x. And cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent, so it is x over y. With your side partner, talk about which things are positive here, which things are positive and negative here, which things are positive and negative here, and which things are positive and negative here. Okay, let's compare your answers. Did you get that everything is positive here? Radius is always positive, so if x is positive and y is positive, the only thing that can be is all positive. In the second quadrant, sine and cosecant are positive because y is the only thing that's positive. Everything else involves x. In the third quadrant, tangent and cotangent are both positive because tangent and cotangent are x over y or y over x. They're both x and y are both negative here, so negative divided by negative is a positive. Negative divided by negative is a positive. Cosine and secant are the only two that are positive in this one because our x is positive, so x over r or r over x is the only thing that's positive. This is important to know because when we are given angles in quadrants, we sometimes have to determine what the positive and negative values are. So let's take a look at an example. All right, so sine of theta is 4/5 and cosine of theta is negative 3/5. It says find the other trig functions and in what quadrant does the angle terminate. We're actually going to start with this piece right here. So we want to draw our quadrant. We want to think about where does that angle end? Well, where is sine positive and cosine negative? Well, sine is positive in the first and the second quadrant. Cosine, so sine is positive here and here. Cosine is negative here and here. So it means it has to be in our second quadrant. So let's draw what that picture looks like. Okay. Remember, this is my y, this is my r, this is my x, this is my r. So my y is 4, my x is -3, and my r is 5. Okay, so we've come to the left -3, and we've gone up 4, and so we have this point here. This is our right triangle. So this is -3, this is +4, and this is 5. So now we need to figure out what are the other trig functions. We know sine, we know cosine, tangent is y over x, so that's 4 over -3. Cotangent is the reciprocal of that, or 1 over this, so 1 over 4 over -3 is simply -3 over 4. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine, so it is 5 over -3. And cosecant is the reciprocal of of sine, so it is 5 over 4. All right, let's take a look at this one. Sine of theta is equal to -5 over 5, and cosine of theta is equal to 2 square roots of 5 over 5. It also says, find the other trig functions and what quadrant does the angle terminate. So it's just like this last one. So I'd like you to work that on your own. So pause it, please, and work this. All right, so let's figure out what quadrant it's in, because that will tell us positive and negatives. Sine is negative in this quadrant, in this quadrant, and this quadrant, the third and the fourth quadrants. Cosine is positive in the first and the fourth quadrants. So what quadrants are they both? Is sine negative and cosine positive? It's got to be in the fourth quadrant. That will be important when we're doing some of these other pieces. All right, so let's try this again here. So you have the sine of theta equals negative square root of 5 over 5. You have the cosine of theta equals 2 square roots of 5 over 5. Remember, this is my x, this is my y, this is my r, this is my x, and this is my r. Would you find the other 4 trig functions? Okay. So tangent of theta, remember, is y over x, so it's the negative square root of 5 over 2 square roots of 5, but that will simplify, so it's -1/2. Should tangent be negative in this fourth quadrant? Because remember, we're in this quadrant here. Yes, it should. How about cotangent of theta? Cotangent of theta is x over y. So we have 2 square roots of 5 over negative square root of 5 equals -2. Secant of theta is the reciprocal of cosine. So that is 5 over 2 times the square root of 5. Cosecant of theta is the reciprocal of this. So it's -5 over the square root of 5. Now we should rationalize both of those. So if we rationalize secant of theta, I'm going to give myself a little bit more room here. If we rationalize secant of theta, We multiply top and bottom by the square root of 5. So that becomes 5 times the square root of 5 over 10, which simplifies to the square root of 5 over 2. Cosecant, when we rationalize, becomes negative 5 times the square root of 5 over 5. When we simplify, becomes a negative square root of 5. Now, we didn't draw the picture over here, but we set it into the fourth quadrant. So let's see what the picture looks like. So remember, this is my y value, this is my x value. So it says go to the right, 2 times the square root of 5. Which is about 4.472. So go to the right this way, about to here. And then go down, square root of 5, negative square root of 5. Which is about 2.23. So over almost 5, down just a little over 2. This is your triangle. Here is 2 square roots of 5. Here is negative square root of 5. And here is 5. Please make sure when you're doing this that you are drawing the pictures. So your homework for tomorrow is on page 134. It's numbers 11 to 23, every other odd, 27 to 33, the odds, and 35 to 42, all with illustrations. With the illustrations means like what we did earlier, where we drew it, and you drew your triangle, and you label the pieces. All right, we'll do more tomorrow. Bye.